The Space Marines, or Adeptus Astartes, are foremost amongst the defenders of humanity, the greatest of the Emperor of mankind's warriors. They are barely human at all, but superhuman, having been made superior in all aspects to a normal man by a harsh regime of genetic modification, psycho-conditioning, and rigorous training. Space Marines are untouched by plague or any natural disease and can suffer wounds that would kill a lesser being several times over and live to fight again. Clad in ancient power armor and wielding the most potent weapons known to man, the Space Marines are terrifying foes, and their devotion to the Emperor and the Imperium of Man is unyielding. They are the God Emperor's angels of death, and they know no fear. The Astartes are physically stronger, far more resilient, and often mentally far removed from the lot of most normal human beings. In the presence of the Astartes, most people feel a combination of awe and fear, and many cultures on the more primitive worlds simply worship them outright as demigods or angels of the God Emperor made flesh. They should feel so, for many Space Marines feel little compassion for those they have sometimes termed mortals in comparison to themselves, seeing the very people they were created to protect as little more than obstacles to a more efficient eradication of the Imperium's enemies. This is an attitude sometimes taken by whole chapters. They see normal humans as frail, weak creatures given to the follies of temptation, avarice, greed, lust, and cowardice, all emotions they rarely feel, if ever. Yet there are some Astartes who remember why they were created by the Emperor, who avoid the trap of hubris which the Space Marines are so prone to, and which has seduced so many of their number to serve the ruinous powers of chaos. They are the final guardians of mankind, the saviors of last resort. They were intended not to lead humanity, but to defend it, sometimes even from itself. At the heart of that mission lies the limitless compassion the Emperor extended to every man and woman in the galaxy, when he willingly chose to condemn himself to more than 10,000 years of imprisonment within a dying prison of flesh for their sake. Some Astartes sneer at compassion, seeing it as one more human weakness that has been purged from their superior transhuman bodies and minds. But the wisest of the Space Marines know that, in the end, compassion is their only salvation. Potential Space Marines are usually, but not always, recruited from the worlds where a chapter has established its fortress monastery, although some chapters are known to recruit from a collection of different worlds in an area of space that they protect or frequent. Recruiting methods vary from chapter to chapter. Some select their neophytes from feral tribes roaming the surface of inhospitable worlds, while others draw upon eager volunteers who have been groomed from birth to become an Astartes. Still others watch and kidnap potential warriors, turning them into Astartes whether they will it or not. Whatever the method, all Space Marine chapters will only accept those who successfully pass the grueling initiation trials and prove themselves worthy of becoming a Space Marine. However a man becomes a Space Marine does not matter. Once his body has been forged into that of a transhuman Astartes, he must forever stand apart from the people to whom he was once kin and who he is now sworn to protect. Once a man becomes a Space Marine, he is no longer mortal. His genetic heritage is now that of the Emperor himself, and a spark of the same divine majesty flows in his veins. There are approximately 1,000 Space Marine chapters active in the Imperium of Man at any one time. Since the opening of the Great Rift in the era Indomitus, these chapters have been comprised of a mixture of traditional firstborn Space Marines and the even more enhanced Primaris Space Marines, or may contain only Primaris Marines. A list of the most notable and well-known chapters in the Imperium can be found here. This number has stayed relatively constant since the second founding in the 31st millennium, following the Horus Heresy, when the first founding Space Marine legions were broken up. However, the exact population of Astartes in the galaxy remains far from exact and may fluctuate wildly depending on the time period and the circumstances confronting the Imperium. The Space Marines are the Imperium of Man's supreme transhuman warriors. Genetically enhanced to be the ultimate soldiers of mankind, they are far stronger and more resilient than ordinary human beings. Space Marines are organised into roughly 1,000 chapters, with each chapter numbering approximately 1,000 warriors, organised into 10 companies of 100 troops each. Each chapter is a self-sufficient Imperial army, equipped with its own spacecraft and capable of responding at a moment's notice to any threat to the security of the Imperium. Every chapter is fiercely proud of its history and its achievements, and each one has its own distinctive colours and heraldic markings. These were established at the chapter's founding and are displayed with pride upon all its armour and vehicles. All of the war gear of the Space Marines is painstakingly maintained, and many items are covered in lines of intricately rendered devotional script in High Gothic, each line detailing a battle honour won in glorious campaign. A Space Marine is a towering transhuman warrior, his brute strength tempered by inhuman skill. He is armed with fearsome bolter guns, a blessed weapon that fires devastating mass-reactive shells that explode within the flesh of the target. He is protected by a suit of power armor, shielding him from the fiercest of enemy fire whilst simultaneously strengthening his blows and allowing him to survive the most hostile of environments. He is the product of intensive training and genetic manipulation, which transforms mortal men selected from the deadliest warrior races in the known galaxy into the most lethal of superhuman killing machines in mankind's arsenal. The Primarchs. Of the 1,000 or more Space Marine chapters thought to be in existence at the present time, a blessed few can trace their beginnings back to an age more than 10,000 standard years ago in the late 30th millennium, when the Emperor of Mankind still walked amongst mortals. In those days, the Emperor first created the Primarchs, 20 immortal superhumans blessed with extraordinary intelligence, charisma, and sheer physical might who were to be his proconsuls, generals, and closest comrades during the Great Crusade to reunite the scattered and long isolated human colony worlds after the end of the Age of Strife. The Primarchs wielded powers the like of which are not known in the Imperium today, yet they were lost to the warp in an accident deep within the Emperor's gene laboratories beneath the fortress that would become the Imperial Palace. They were scattered, still in their gestation capsules, through the Immaterium to worlds across the galaxy by the will of the Dark Gods of Chaos. The first Space Marines of the Nascent Imperium were also the creation of that era, each made using the genetic inheritance of one of the Primarchs, albeit diluted 100 times, for no merely human body could contain such power. As each of the Primarchs were encountered in turn by Imperial expeditionary fleets during the progress of the Great Crusade, they became the natural and obvious leader of the Space Marine Legion, created from their genetic material and with whom they had so much in common. In many cases, the Primarch's adopted world became the new base of operations for their legion and was known henceforth as that legion's homeworld. The Primarchs then recruited their loyal followers from each of these worlds' peoples into the ranks of their legion, while others were given rights to draw fresh blood from suitable warlike worlds that were liberated as the Great Crusade progressed. With the rediscovery of the Primarchs, and in many cases newly adopted homeworlds used as Legion's fiefs, most commonly the worlds upon which a Legion's new master had been found, this was to change the character and culture of the original Legions profoundly. Some alterations were superficial, a habit of speech, a change in close-quarter tactics, martial traditions, and warranted additions to iconography and even language. But for others, the change would prove dramatic, with entire paradigms of culture, tradition, and even ideology overwriting what had come before, such as in what came to be known as the Space Wolves and Dark Angels legions. In many cases, the stamp of the legions and the will of the Primarchs on their recruits came to largely outweigh differences of birth or blood. But in other legions, such as the Lunar Wolves and the Emperor's Children, a subtle divide would grow between these veterans born on Terra who had been recruited into the ranks of the Astartes by the Emperor, and those who had come into the legion from their Primarch's homeworld. This cultural rift would be one factor among many that would lead several of the first founding legions towards ultimate damnation. The names of many of the Primarchs still echo down the millennia, and the tales of their deeds are legendary. Names such as Leon L. Johnson, Leman Russ, Regal Dawn, Vulcan, Corax, and the angel-winged Sanguinius are spoken of with awe on those worlds where mankind dwells. They command a reverence second only to that afforded to the Emperor himself. Other names are cursed wherever men gather, for many of the Primarchs rebelled against the Emperor and followed Horus, mightiest of their number, when he raised his standard against mankind on behalf of chaos. Space Marine recruitment. Each chapter of Space Marines has its own methods of recruiting young warriors to fill its ranks. Many are based on a single homeworld and recruit solely from that populace, setting trials and tests for prospective candidates to weed out all but the strongest and the most faithful. These worlds are often technologically backward, with strong militaristic societies, where male children who show potential are pushed harder and harder that they may one day have a chance to join the ranks of the Space Marines, who are often known to such peoples as Star Warriors, Sky Knights, or similar names. Because feral worlds are rough, primitive, and untamed, their inhabitants invariably provide excellent recruits. For true aggression and nigh psychotic killer instinct, however, few recruits can best the murderous city scum that roam the darkest pits of the Imperium's many hive worlds. Driven to extremes of violence by the pressures of hive world living, these merciless killers are usually ignored by the authorities. They make ideal Space Marine recruits, and whole gangs of city scum are sometimes hunted down and made to undergo the trials. Some recruits are drawn from the more civilized worlds of the Imperium, but not very many. These planets used by the Space Marines as recruiting worlds are observed closely by the chapter's apothecaries and chaplains. The population's genetic purity must be maintained in order to conserve those qualities that serve the Space Marines' purposes best. Their spiritual health is also maintained to ensure that no trace of the influence of the ruinous powers becomes manifest. Such observations are in general carried out from a distance, and it is rare for the society to have any direct contact with, or knowledge of, the Space Marines, or in many cases even of the Imperium. The chapter's officers might visit the culture once a generation, and will be the subject of myth and legend. These mighty warriors from beyond the stars are figures of awe, and their word is law. The nature of the trials set by the outsiders vary enormously, but all are so arduous that only a handful pass them. Those who fail may be lucky enough to even survive, for many trials take the form of ritual combat, the hunting of a great beast, or the performance of incredibly dangerous feats of strength and bravery. At the conclusion of the trials, those few aspirants who have been deemed worthy are taken away, invariably never to see their people again. It is always a great honour for a family to have a son chosen by the Space Marines, even for societies with little conception of the greater galaxy beyond their world. The Space Wolves are an excellent example of this. The wolf priests of the Space Wolves scour the warring tribes of their homeworld Fenris for their strongest and bravest youths, while the Ultramarines traditionally draw their candidates from the elite training barracks of a whole group of planetary systems. Other chapters have no single homeworld and travel the galaxy in gigantic fleets of battleships, recruiting either from a regular series of worlds or from the war zones to which they are assigned. The Black Templars are one such example of a fleet-based chapter, as are the Dark Angels. Once accepted, the young aspirants become neophytes and begin their regime of training and biological enhancement. Each chapter has its own traditions regarding the initiation of the recruit into its legends and secrets. This process often runs parallel to the biogenetic treatments the neophyte must undergo. As the physical transformation proceeds, spiritual change also occurs. Both are tempered by ongoing experience on the field of battle and the rituals in which the neophyte must participate. The nature of such rites varies enormously from one chapter to the next. Some are solemn affairs, recalling the sacrifice of the Emperor made for humanity. Others are raucous celebrations drawing on the culture and nature of the chapter's homeworld. Still, more are bloody and barbaric, involving ritual bloodletting, scarification, or amputation. All are vital to the arcane workings of the chapter, and his participation is a prerequisite of the neophyte's acceptance by his would-be brothers in arms. Such are the rigours of the training that many do not survive. Whether he is crippled upon a battlefield or found spiritually wanting during a particularly exacting ritual, a neophyte may find himself cast out, his future with the chapter curtailed. In some instances, the neophyte may transgress one of the many articles of chapter law, and injury at war may prove preferable to the punishment. Many possible fates await those who fall by the wayside in this manner. Most are mind-scrubbed and become chapter serfs, manservants and menials. The less fortunate are transformed into living, cybernetic servitors, mindless biochemical automatons who only exist to assist the chapter's tech marines in the operation of heavy and frequently dangerous machinery. A very rare few may yet rise to positions of relative power within the chapter's feudal household, yet even the highest-ranking factotum is but a lowly, nameless servant in the eyes of the Full Battle Brothers. The world that the Space Marines recruit from often have a wide range of legends regarding the Adeptus Astartes. As many of the communities in question are primitive or barbaric, the people regarding the Space Marines as otherworldly figures, angels of death who arrive once in a generation to test them and carry away their strongest sons. On more advanced worlds, the people will have more of an understanding of who and what the Adeptus Astartes are, and regard the success of an aspirant as an honour to the entire community. On some worlds, the knowledge that a distant ancestor was recruited into the Astartes is as good as a patent of nobility, and portraits of the legendary hero adorn the walls, and prayers are said to him as if he were a saint of the imperial cult in times of need. Space Marine Combat Doctrine. Every Space Marine chapter is fiercely proud of its history and achievements, and each is marked out by its own distinctive colours and chapter heraldry. These chapters and iconography were established at the time of each chapter's founding and are displayed with unadulterated pride upon all armour and vehicles owned by the chapter. The war gear of the chapter is maintained with painstaking precision, and many items have been covered over the millennia in fine lines of intricate devotional script in High Gothic, with each line detailing a battle honour of the chapter won by a previous user of the weapon. Each chapter is commanded by an officer, usually known as a chapter master, who holds a rank equivalent within the imperial hierarchy to that of a planetary governor. Each chapter is a small, mobile army, and although each contains only 1,000 battle brothers, a chapter's actual combat potential is equivalent to at least 10 times that number of normal troops drawn from the Astra Militarum, Imperial Guard. Each chapter has its own transports, support staff, armourers, and chapter fleets of warships, and are intended to respond to any type of threat that can emerge anywhere in the galaxy. Because they are so mobile compared to other Imperial military units, the Space Marines are often the first servants of the Emperor to arrive at a scene of conflict, and they are used to mount deep strikes, raids, and devastating surprise attacks. The archetypal mission for which the Space Marines were created over 10,000 Terran years ago is the Planet Strike, or Planetary Assault. Such an offensive begins with the Astartes chapter fleet engaging with and cleaning away any defending starships and neutralizing the target world's orbital defenses, ground-based laser batteries, and missile silos. Enemy ground offenses are sabotaged by the chapter's Scout Marine or Vanguard Marine forces, or captured by full Astartes from its battle companies. Often the bulk of a Space Marine force deployed to planetary assault will deploy directly into battle, forcing a decisive engagement to take advantage of the considerable shock of their appearance upon the battlefield. When the Space Marines arrive in this manner, they must deploy as rapidly as possible to maintain the element of surprise that plays such a crucial role for them in achieving battlefield success. To this end, Space Marine warships are equipped with hundreds of drop pods and large hangar bays filled with deadly Thunderhawk gunships. The contrails of these craft, high in a world's atmosphere, are often the only harbinger of a Space Marine assault. As the chapter's drop pods and Thunderhawks streak through the embattled sky towards the rendezvous with blood and fire, the enemies of the Emperor come to realize that their doom is at hand. The Space Marines always prefer to deploy right into the heart of the enemy force and proceed to unleash a devastating barrage of bolter fire. The initial shock of this assault can break an enemy force before a campaign has barely begun, ending a rebellion or forcing an alien invader off-world in one fell stroke. These shock assaults are usually spearheaded by squads of Terminators drawn from a chapter's veteran First Company who teleport directly into the heart of the foe's lines and are supported by heavier units like armoured vehicles that have been delivered to the world's surface by Thunderhawk transporters. Each company of a chapter is able to field a mix of battle line, close support, fire support, and veteran squads depending on its type. An entire company of Astartes is rarely fielded as a tactical force. Instead, each Space Marine force is exactly tailored to the tactical requirements of the combat mission at hand, usually with elements drawn from the versatile battle companies. Such a force might consist of only 3 or 4 squads, supported by individual squads drawn from other companies, as well as a complement of armoured vehicles and dreadnoughts. This force will be led into combat by a captain, a lieutenant, a senior veteran sergeant, a chaplain, or a librarian who serves as the force commander. On very rare occasions, a Space Marine chapter will be called upon to carry out a mission or face an enemy of such size and power that it must deploy a large portion of its total strength. In these instances, forces consisting of 200 or even 300 Astartes and their supporting vehicles are not uncommon. Such a force is deployed only to those locations where the enemy's advance must be stopped at all costs. For instance, during the Second and Third Wars for Armageddon, it was determined by the High Lords of Terra that the Orc warlord Ghazghkull Thraka had to be prevented from extending his war beyond that strategically located hive world, lest his greenskin hordes gain footholds on more populous worlds in the Segmentum Solar and wreak absolute havoc on the Imperium's heart. As such, several legendary Astartes chapters, like the Blood Angels, Salamanders, and Black Templars, deployed several full battle companies in their supreme effort to halt the advance of the Orcs. Such was the skill that Armageddon became a new word for total war in the Orc Kultor. The nature of the Adeptus Astartes missions means that a chapter's various components may be spread across the galaxy at any one time, with individual detachments involved in separate conflicts thousands of light years apart. It is very unusual for all 10 companies of a chapter to be gathered in the same place at the same time, and centuries can pass between gatherings of an entire chapter for a single mission. As a result, the deployment of an entire Space Marine chapter indicates the need to combat a threat that may rend the very fabric of the Imperium itself if left undefeated. The deployment of such a force can only be requested by the High Lords of Terra and is led by the chapter master in person. Such a gathering of martial power can bring a fortress world to its knees, halt an alien invasion, or even hurl back a Black Crusade. Legendary existential threats to the Emperor's realm, such as the Helican Schism, the Macarian Heresy, and the Tyrannic Wars, have seen the need to call upon entire chapters. Whole worlds have become shrines to remember the fallen of these conflicts. Each of these campaigns engulfed large regions of Imperial space and involved countless millions of troops, yet were ultimately decided only by the unmatched heroism of a relatively small number of the Emperor's Angels of Death, the Space Marines. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give the video a like and subscribe, because I'm going to be releasing brand new Warhammer 40k videos all the time. So subscribe to never miss a single one. My name is George, this is Jam Punch, and I'll see you next time.